All right, welcome IBDP English at Sunway. I wanted to talk to you this week about specifically the article that we are reading called The Say of the Land. And one of the big ideas in it is metaphor and the way that metaphors and our relationship with them has changed in terms of how we speak. And so it's titled How the Thinking of Mankind Has Developed and the Centrality of Metaphor. So, in the past, there was people, when they spoke, they used words that only had one meaning. They may have had multiple ideas associated with them, but there was really only one meaning. And Owen Barfield, one of the main people quoted in this article, calls them the dawn people. And that's basically just people of the dawn, the earliest humans, and they've been alive far longer than we have. This would come all the way up into the Middle Ages. But the dawn people, what was special about them, he calls them active participants, and that means to them, the world is alive, the trees are alive, the wind represents spirits, fire is a type of god or is alive as well, and the thunder is kind of the voice of God, and as well as the rain. And so to them, if you're on a mountain and you see a big rock falling down, it's because the rock wants to come down, and maybe it misses its family at the bottom of the mountain. If the rock tries to, knock you off the mountain, then that's because it's angry at you. It hates you for some reason. Everything happened for a reason. And for them, that reason was reasonable. It explained all the inexplicable things about the world. And it created this language that was poetic in many ways because, say, the word wind is also the idea of spirit. Everything they talked about had life and had soul in it. Each word didn't just mean, if you talk about a heart, they wouldn't say heart and talk about just the pump in your body. When they say heart, they meant your emotions, your ideas, your beliefs, your deepest dreams are all part of your heart. And so these were people of poets. And we've actually left kind of the poetic side of our language just to the poets themselves and maybe the songwriters. And now our language is more precise, but we've also lost a type of soul and a type of feeling with our language. There's no longer the spiritual connection with the land. And in fact, with each other. There was languages about relationship. They were related to the land they walked on. So we compare the dawn people to the new age of science. The scientific view basically is only concerned with natural phenomena, meaning those things that are observable and measurable by humans. It has to be testable, that is, be open to being proven wrong. And by necessity, this ignores any spiritual or supernatural explanations for things. So as you guys knew from a young age, maybe grade 5, 6, 7, science is always observable, testable, measurable, and repeatable. So things like some supernatural encounter or some spiritual force maybe is observable, but certainly you can't repeat it or you can't measure specifically the exact effect every single time. You can't test what's happening. And so science doesn't even care at all about those things. And as a reflection of that, we often don't care about those things. And perhaps we've been able to accomplish more, innovate more because of that, but we may have lost something in the process. So let's shift to Lord of the Rings. There's one of the best characters, the wise Gandalf the Grey. And he's one of the Valar, so he's been alive for about 4,000 years in this fictional world. And another one of his companions is Saruman. And Saruman will take something apart. He'll break it and dissect it in order to understand how it works. And he creates these Uruk-hai, these powerful orc warriors, and he creates this huge army, and he becomes quite powerful by studying things in this way. But the downside is that he has left the path of wisdom. He doesn't kind of care about things as they are holistically. He doesn't care about the spirit of things, his relationship with the world. He wants to control the world. And so Gandalf says, he that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. And one of my favorite poets, Malcolm Guite, says that is perhaps the wisest thing said in the last 100 years. And Tolkien, who created the character of Gandalf, was heavily influenced by another Inkling, Owen Barfield, who we've just talked about and who's in the article. He suggested that the ancients saw the world in a unified conscience, or in other words, they understood the world in a participatory way. Everything was alive, and they were a part of it. So we talked about the Inklings. Let's dig a bit deeper into them. They were just a little drinking club of professors from Oxford and I believe Cambridge. And I think once a week, or maybe more often, they would meet at this pub, the Eagle and Child, because they were able to get a room in the top and meet and talk, and they'd share what they had wrote, and they'd have conversations. And these are some brilliant people. You probably have heard of at least one of the two most famous of them, and that'd be J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. Now, they've had pretty big impact on the world. Here, I just went to Wikipedia, and out of the top 10 most popular books of all time, 3 of the top 10 were written by Inklings in England who met at this little pub, the Eagle and Child. So you can see number 1 is Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. Then number 7 is The Hobbit by Tolkien. And finishing out at number 10 is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, a wonderful kids' book by C.S. Lewis, a fellow Inkling. So they were a little club, but they had a remarkable influence on the world. And Barfield, who was one of the Inklings, had a large impact on Tolkien and on C.S. Lewis. In Lord of the Rings, there's the elves, and they can do magic, but their magic isn't to control others. It's kind of participation with nature. They create ropes that will undo themselves when you ask them to. They create things that kind of make nature even better instead of taking it apart to control it. And this has a large impact on how we view the world. So, again, we think of words as having many meanings. The ancients just used one. They all meant one complex thing with multiple aspects. To them, each word had soul or a relationship with both the person using it and the world around them. They were interrelated with everything. If you said something maybe angry to your wife, or you caused distress in the world, maybe you'd be punished by the things around you, maybe the weather, maybe something else. And so they believed that there was incredible consequence to whatever you said. So one of the words in Greek was pneuma, and meant spirit, wind, or breath. In the same way, in cultures and language, including the word actually ruach in ancient Hebrew, because of this, concepts like respiration and inspiration were the same things. For an ancient, you couldn't feel the wind without thinking. It was a spirit. If you breathe in and you're inspired, it's like breath itself, wind itself, will fill you with ideas and creativity. So all that comes then to metaphor. People would say, in modern times, we would say, oh, the wind is a spirit. And we would say it kind of facetiously. We wouldn't really mean the wind is a spirit, but we want to sound poetic. But for the ancient people, they actually believed that the wind is a spirit. And so their words were both metaphor and they were poetry, even in just regular speaking. And so I've got some quotes from this book called The Metaphors We Live By. And he says that we still speak through metaphor. We still think of the world through metaphor. So for example, whenever we talk about argument, we use the metaphor of war. We say things like, your claims are indefensible. He attacked every weak point in my argument. His criticism were right on target. I demolished his argument. I've never won an argument with him. You disagree? Okay, shoot. If you use that strategy, he'll wipe you out. He shot down all my arguments. You can just see like warplanes or different things. And we almost don't notice it anymore. And because of that, we treat arguments like something you have to win. When perhaps if we just had disagreed and had a discussion, we both might win. And so this metaphor that we use to understand the world actually shapes the way we see the world. We see the person as an opponent. We try to attack his positions and defend our world. But it doesn't have to be like that. Think about time. We treat it very similar to money, especially in the Western world. Time is money. People repeat that all the time. Hourly wages. We pay people based on their time. Hotel room rates based on their time. Yearly budgets. Interest on loans based on time. And paying your debt to society by serving time in jail. These practices are all pretty new in our history of the human race. and they don't exist in all countries. They've arisen in modern industrialized societies, and they structure our basic everyday activities in a very profound way. Because we act as if time is a valuable commodity, which it is limited, and even money, we conceive of time like that. Thus, we understand and experience time as a kind of thing that can be spent, wasted, budgeted, invested wisely or poorly, saved or squandered. There's wisdom to it, but there's also dangerous things to thinking always through this metaphor. We even think of words themselves as a conduit for ideas. So people say, I gave you that idea. So the idea, you speak it through words to give it to somebody else. Things like your reasons came through to us. It's difficult to put my ideas into words. When you have a good idea, try to capture it immediately in words so that the idea isn't the words. The idea is something you put into words. Words kind of hold ideas. Try to pack more thought into fewer words. You can't simply stuff ideas into any sentence any old way. The meaning is right there in the words. Don't force your meanings into the wrong words. So we choose our words to capture what we're trying to say or what we're trying to think, but it's not that our ideas are the words. And so that's an interesting way of how metaphor affects our words. Sometimes only context provides meaning, and that's something that we're going to keep talking about in IB. So Paula Downing wrote this story. She heard the sentence, "Please sit in the apple juice seat." If you hear that, it doesn't make much sense. If you don't know the context, you won't understand that sentence. In isolation, it has no meaning at all, since the expression apple juice seat is not a conventional way of referring to any kind of object. But the sentence makes perfect sense in the context in which it was uttered. An overnight guest came down to breakfast. There are 4 place settings, 3 with orange juice and 1 with apple juice. It was clear what the apple juice seat was, and even the next morning when there was no apple juice, it was still clear which seat was the apple juice seat. So that's why when we read, there's so much focus on context. People say context is king. But metaphors don't make sense unless you understand context. Some metaphors are clear enough that people can kind of pick up and understand it. But usually a metaphor is something that has to be learnt, and it changes the way we see the world. Even think about relationships. We often use terms of money with relationships. I want to invest in that relationship. Oh, he's really drawing things out of me. So think about the words you use to describe things and what effect that has on how you view the things. Here's one more example of the phrase, we need new alternative sources of energy. So much depends on the context of who's saying that. If it was the president of Mobil Oil, or Petronas in Malaysia, from what it means to be the president of Friends of the Earth, some hippie organization, the meaning is not right there in the sentence. It matters a lot who's saying it or listening to the sentence and what his or her social and political attitudes are. Now let's look at structure. The way that we view where ideas fit actually is pretty powerful and shapes as well how we view them. So structural ideas put them in a whole system of concepts with respect to one another. So we'll call them orientation metaphors because they orient things up and down, back and forward, in and out. Since most of them have to do with spatial orientation, these arise from the fact that we have bodies of the sort we have, and they function as they do in our physical environment. So think about something like happy. Which direction is it? We would say happy is up. And that makes sense. You know, if you've seen the movie Up, there's sort of a happiness as they go up. You go flying, it's happy, it's wonderful. But then sadness then, or maybe darkness, is down below. And you think about that, like the depths of the ocean is dark, or like the lava is dark and dangerous. It's scary. And so happy is up, sad is down. You'd say things like, I'm feeling up. That boosted my spirits. My spirits rose. You're in high spirits. Thinking about her always gives me a lift. I'm feeling down. I'm depressed. He's really low these days. I fell into depression. My spirits sank. Physical basis. Drooping posture typically goes along with sadness and depression. Erect, upright posture with a positive emotional state. So think about that. There's really no specific relationship with up and down and happiness and sadness, but we've created one,